have one in the audience today. I think you can see her ears. I'm rather hoping she'll stay there or go that way. Ah, that's good. She's going that way. Hello and welcome. Now, this first comment is, I'd like to take 6 months and robe up, then go back to inevitable obligations. Where is it easier to do this? England or Thailand or somewhere else? Thanks for these recordings. Well, the easy answer for me to say there is I don't know. It rather depends on what your intentions are. If your intentions are to ordain, but at the end of 6 months disrobe, then it, technically speaking, is rather pointless to take ordination. You could just go and live and stay in a monastery with other monks, help out, practice meditation, learn the Dharma for that 6 months period, or take some other kind of retreat to benefit your practice of meditation, which you can then use in lay life when you return to your inevitable obligations. Now, certainly in some Buddhist countries, they do have something that is called pabaja, which is also the first stage of ordination, novice ordination, where you take the 75 training rules on board. And this would normally be for monks ordaining into the Sangha with the intention of remaining ordained as their interim first step. So for 1 or 2 years you would be a samanera, a novice monk, having taken that pabaja ordination. But this is also utilized for temporary ordination of monks, whom is given to natives of those Buddhist countries who have been brought up in the Dharma, so to speak. Their educational systems, their cultural surroundings, even the constitution of their countries is based on Buddhism as a religion, as the core structure of philosophy, way of life, understanding, and knowledge of how monks live and their purpose is known by all from from the minute they can understand anything at all. They're growing up with monks in their presence, maybe teaching in their schools, maybe living in their schools, which double up as educational centres in some places, and being very familiar with the way monks are and their own specific very long list of strict rules, their Patimokkha rules, their 227 rules coming from the Vinaya. They are offered the opportunity, having gained an understanding of sila, moral virtue, knowing through their studies in school about the Dharma via means of the Jataka tales, the fables and fairy tales, if you like, of Buddhism, the Dhammapada, which is very good educational quotes taken directly from the suttas, and their studies of the Pali Canon itself. They have a very good grounding in the Dharma. So they have moral virtue, a good grounding in the Dharma, and an understanding of how monks live. So given that, they're given the opportunity to maybe, and with the support often of their employers, or if they work for certainly government organisations, the government itself, to take a sabbatical from their work and ordain for maybe a couple of weeks, a couple of months, or even 6 months, even a year in some cases. Members of the armed forces, for instance, in Thailand, I think, and government workers can ordain for up to a year and lose none of their employee benefits. I think they might receive a reduced salary, I'm not sure, but for instance, maybe pension benefits or health benefits for their families are not lost through that employment, and they walk back into their previous job at the same rank. This is all supportive of the culture that they're living within. But For people coming from the West, you'll find that in England, you asked about whether England or Thailand would be best for this. In England, that is not offered, not temporary ordination. It is seen as somewhat pointless. There's so much training towards full ordination involved. As I say, 1 year at least as a samanera. Previous to that, you might spend 2 years just living in a monastery on the 8 or 10 precepts as an anagarika, a white-robed individual, whether it's a monk or a nun, a monastery or a monastery of ladies, nuns, nunnery, convent. This is the usual order of events leading up to bhikkhu or bhikkhuni ordination. It takes something like 3 years minimum. So to think it's authentic ordination if you just walk in the doors, put on some robes, as you say, robe up, and then 6 months later walk out, that is more a kind of what I call a bucket list opportunity. And I think that is offered on a commercial basis in some countries. I have heard of this. I think people can pay money, go and ordain in what is an authentic monastery with real monks, bhikkhus, and have that experience. And I say it's a bucket list experience because you'll often see tales of such here on this kind of platform, YouTube or even whatever other platforms are available these days, gaining lots of views and making lots of money because someone can say, I was a Buddhist monk for 6 months in Thailand. And that gets a lot of interest, a lot of attraction. But you were really not a Buddhist monk if you had the full intention of disrobing at the end of any set period of time. Even if you ordain with the intention of, I will disrobe in 5 years, you're not practicing renunciation in the true spirit of nekama, the Pali word for renunciation, because you fully intend to revert back to your ordinary life. Also, its authenticity as ordination is somewhat questionable because you haven't given up necessarily everything in order to ordain. The process of ordination is bearing yourself, making yourself dependent on the Sangha. You relinquish all money, all belongings, even ties and associations with your friends and family. As close as they may have been, you no longer have much to do with them after ordination. And if you fully intend to keep the money that you've accrued so far, the properties that you live in, pension benefits, a role to go back to in your job, then as a Westerner, someone coming from the modern world or someone coming from a non-Buddhist background and environment and country is going into experience renunciation without renouncing anything at all. Whereas someone whom is living in a Buddhist environment already understands that for that 6 months they will have nothing close to what they're normally used to, because they already have lived all of their lives in and amongst and with visiting temples on a regular basis with the Sangha. Even so, it is still not full bhikkhu ordination, and it might be in some temples in Thailand, for instance, given as such as full bhikkhu ordination, the full ordination. I'm not quite sure how it works in that respect, but that is usually in and amongst the what we call the city temples, or they're referred to as village temples, the orange-coloured monks that you might see on in Thailand, as opposed to the training monasteries and forest monasteries that are also there, which would not necessarily would certainly not offer temporary ordination facilities to foreign participants, only to natives of that particular region, that village, whose families have been coming to that monastery for all of their lives. So they have a direct relationship already established. But as far as those commercial options that are available for this kind of bucket list ordination that may be available, I wouldn't know anything about that. Or indeed suggest it's even at all worthwhile. As I say, it's better to just go and live in a monastery or go on a long meditation retreat rather than complicate it by restricting your choice of where you can actually do that. If you're in England, you can go and stay in the various monasteries that are available to you there. Thai forest monasteries, there are 4, and live in one of those maybe for 6 months and see how you get on. And it may be that after 6 months you might not want to return to your inevitable obligations, and then that would be a good time to consider ordaining, taking full ordination, taking pavajar, going through the training process, the long process leading to full ordination, and renouncing everything to become a monk for the rest of your life. Okay. Could someone type out the word Bhante says around 23.30 of the video? It shows gladness for, it was Anumodana, A-N-U-M-O-D-A-N-A, and someone kindly did type that out for you. And yes, it does mean mutual appreciation, gratitude, in other words, without saying thank you. So for all of your generous support, both with all these comments I receive, encouraging, kind and encouraging words of support in all of these comments, and the many emails I receive, the donations I receive, or we receive, the financial support you receive through the link there. For all of this, I can say Anumodana, sadhu, 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 which is rejoicing with you in my gratitude and appreciation for that support. And sadhu, 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 excellent and wonderful and marvellous, excellent, wonderful and marvellous, excellent, wonderful and marvellous, because that's what enables me to continue living this life, supported that way. I get the basic needs here. I get fed every day. I get robes from supporters in Thailand. I get shelter provided locally here. We do, with your support, contribute a little bit towards that, just for its general maintenance, upkeep, and any necessary bills that occur as a result of me being here. But it's not very much at all, and enough to give me the basic support or physical shelter that I require to stay in this place practicing. And then finally, any medical requirements, which are few at the moment, but thankfully, but through your generosity, I'm able to maintain this physical body and hopefully keep this thinking mind going a little bit longer to continue doing this. You have been acquainting yourself with the Buddhist texts, or I have been. I'm reading a question, just to make that clear. I have come across the concept of the patient endurance of the uncreate. I notice myself becoming remorseful, thinking that the uncreate requires patience in order to endure me. Is it right to feel remorse towards keeping uncreated or nibbana? I'm not sure if this is a translation there. I'm not sure I understand the question when you say uncreate. It's not a word I've ever used. The unconditioned. So everything is conditioned. Everything is a result of causes and conditions, with the exception of nibbana, which is indescribable, as it is not of this conditioned world, and citta, mind, which is similarly can observe, can be conditioned by this conditioned world, but is not of it, coming from it. They're already there. You only require patience and endurance. We say kanti in the Pali word. It's one of the 10 parami, one of the qualities we need to develop. Kanti, patience and endurance, to see nibbana, or get a glimpse of it, get a glimpse of that unconditioned state, free from suffering. You can see that in this lifetime, and you can attain to it permanently by becoming fully unattached from the defilements of greed, hatred and delusion. But of course, yes, it does require practice and patience and endurance of the suffering that might come as a result of that practice. But if you are practicing well you will see the benefits of the practice almost immediately, and during that maybe what might seem a long wait to attain to Nibbana. But whilst it's so very enjoyable, the journey, you're not going to be having to endure much on that journey to getting there. So you can enjoy for instance, like a journey going from one city to another. You can enjoy all the sights and sounds and experience in between. As long as you have an idea of where you're going and you'll know you're going in the right direction, you can sit back, relax and enjoy the journey. So don't become remorseful if it's that is what you mean. It's a very pleasurable thing to wait for, and the wait is pleasurable. Like waiting for a plane, if it's delayed, they might put you in the special lounge reserved for the VIP people or something like that. Or even if you're very fortunate, the lounge that's reserved for the monks in Buddhist country. We have a very super lounge with a library and everything to sit and really enjoy waiting for the plane, and really glad that it's quite late. So you can really appreciate the benefits of waiting sometimes. And when you really are practicing well, even when you're standing in the bus stop in the hot sunshine with flies all flying around you, or it's a freezing cold winter's day up north somewhere in the northern hemisphere and you're shivering in the bus stop, if you can bring your attention back to the breath and breathing in and breathing out, just know that that's that place of samatha, peace and tranquility of mind that you can always come back to. You can enjoy that wait too without any difficulty, always coming back to that pleasant state of being, state of mind. Feel free to answer this in a way that caters to your strengths. Right, okay. Qualities of a Buddha. There is something called the 64 qualities of a Buddha. The list is quite extensive, but how about your personal top 5 or 10 according to your current view? Well, every day I chant what is called Itipiso, which is the 9 qualities of the Buddha. I don't know about the 64. In one of the suttas, it is described. There are, I know of 32, I thought it was, not 64, actual sort of physical attributes of a Buddha. But that, I think, is to be, to some extent, considered allegorical or mythological, maybe, because of the sheer description. If you find that, read it. I can't remember where you'd find it or what it's called. But no, the chanting every morning, Itipiso Bhagava Arham Sama Sambuddho Dasa, and we chant Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Sama Sambuddhasa, homage to the noble one, the perfectly enlightened one, every morning. But Itipiso is specifically the 9 qualities of the Buddha that we reflect upon. And you just can go to that sutta and read your own language's translation to understand those 9 qualities of mindfulness, patience and compassion, and understand this all-encompassing aspect of the Buddha from just those 9. So I think that's about as much as I can say there, really. As for the 64 qualities, I think that comes from some other tradition. Oh dear. To overcome porn, does one have to accept the guilt, shame, and other emotions that come up? How to practice right mindfulness in that moment? So I spoke about guilt and shame yesterday or last week with regards to hiri and ottappa. So don't watch it. Restrain seeing and hearing. Restrain looking at such material. And then you won't have to experience these, what you are describing as negative emotions of guilt and shame. Self-discipline. Just don't do it. So how to practice right mindfulness in that moment? Well, the minute you are drawn towards such sensual stimulation, you've lost mindfulness because you've allowed yourself to be dragged, pulled away from a more wholesome activity. to distract yourself from what it is that's really happening. So the moment you're drawn towards such activity, unwholesome activity, whatever it may be, even just something as innocent seemingly as watching a movie, a normal movie, instead of sitting in meditation, then know it's because you're finding sitting in meditation unsatisfactory, boring. It's not doing what you'd hoped it would do for you, and you want to absorb yourself otherwise in some material that's of a sensory nature, in a movie or some music or some other form of entertainment. I'm sure I spoke about this in the last talk, so I won't say any more about it than that. Just don't. Stay with the meditation, keep watching the meditation object of the breath, and eventually you will experience far better and more extreme and enjoyable forms of physical pleasure and mental joy, happiness and contentment through samadhi and through jhana meditation. This is far more accessible also at all times. It doesn't run out and doesn't have the effect of giving you any negative corresponding feelings as a result afterwards. You only feel positive as a result afterwards. So look at the negative downsides of that unwholesome action and weigh them up against the positive upsides of wholesome action. And the choice is easy, but the choice is yours. How did you lose your middle finger? We've answered that many times. Lost chopping some wood or something in the forest, and anyway, the answer's there in the comments. Someone else has kindly answered for me. I was just wondering whether you've experienced certain spiritual states like achieving astral projection, or even meeting spirits and entities like it seems the Buddha experienced, as spoken about in the Pali Canon. Maybe you believe there are higher realms with less suffering. Do you believe in cultivating etheric bodies and the chakras, stroke subtle energy centers in the body? If it is just phenomena, can't we also call all things you practice a form of phenomena too? Like getting rid of suffering being a type of phenomena too? No, freedom from suffering is not getting rid of suffering. You're accepting that there is suffering there. It is just not an obstacle to you attaining to nibbana, which is not phenomena. It isn't of this conditioned world, so it isn't experienced through sense consciousness. These other aspects you're describing, we don't talk as monks of our own personal attainments, but as for astral projection, I've been asked this before, I don't even know what it is, or for that matter care about it. As for the Buddha's own experiences that you've heard about, have read about in the sutras, meeting spirits of other realms in order to teach Dharma, this was generally the course of events, then if that was the case, it wouldn't be something that we discuss. Do I believe in other realms? I don't discount anything, but neither do I discount anything do I necessarily believe, but have an understanding that it is perfectly logical that there are both other realms that we can materialistically observe, such as the animal realms within this lifetime linked with this human realm, and heavenly realms and hell realms. And we talk of these both directly and indirectly, We can talk of the 4 Brahma Viharas as the qualities of metta, loving kindness, karuna, compassion, mudita, joy, and upekkha, equanimity, as being a realm. They're called the Brahma Viharas because the Brahmas are gods and Viharas as the abodes. It in itself is a heavenly realm within oneself, so one could find such heavenly realms within oneself. As for with regards to cultivating etheric bodies and chakras and subtle energy centers in the body, no, I don't cultivate or bother with any of that stuff. And I think that just about covers it. Also, please write a book. Yes. All right. In your eyes, is there no point to creation? Is it all just here to be escaped? Well, I don't believe or think of what we're experiencing as creation, but as a result of causes and conditions put in place. So it doesn't need a point. As a result of something, and we do not and are unable to trace it back to any beginning or foresee its end. But what we're experiencing now, which is all that matters, is as a result of causes and conditions that were put in place to give us this experience of now. So it isn't pointless, and we're not escaping it. We're seeing it for what it truly is, which gives us freedom from it, enabling us to let go of attachment to rebirth into samsara cyclically over and over again. Could you give some examples of slightly more refined levels of delusion? I suppose they're hard to see because I'm well deluded. If you're looking for the answers to the questions about delusion, you're not necessarily deluded because you're understanding what delusion is. Firstly, delusion is not ignorance. Ignorance is not knowing. Delusion is not understanding. So ignorance, to some extent, can be eradicated through, and we have 2 different Pali words, avidya, which is ignorance, and moha, which is so lobha, dosa, moha. Moha, which is delusion. Delusion is not understanding. Ignorance is not having the information. You could, to some extent, eradicate ignorance by learning lots of information. But if you don't know how to apply it, so you might have an encyclopedic knowledge of instructions, but no way of actually applying them to use them usefully and having the benefit of that knowledge, this is delusion. Whereas you may have a very limited knowledge of all things, but be able to see things clearly and apply things directly to have the benefit of that application, and that is eradicating delusion. So all we need to do is to settle back and understand what delusion is, which you are doing there, whether it be subtly or you're saying on a more refined levels of delusion, whether it's refined or coarse. The nature of delusion in itself is, but can be both subtle and, once it's recognized, it's neither subtle nor coarse. But in day-to-day practical examples, walking around, if you stub your toe, any slight things that go wrong during your day or accidents that you might have that could have easily been avoided if you'd paid more attention, is a reduction in mindfulness, really. What's that? What am I saying that for? What's that got to do with delusion? But of course, yeah, we have eradicated delusion if we are applying mindfulness to all of our daily activities to some extent, and therefore you're seeing both the coarse and refined levels of delusion. Let me read the question again, because I mixed myself up a bit there. Could you give some examples of slightly more refined levels of delusion? Thinking that any forms of rites and rituals, they're not that refined though, they're pretty coarse, aren't they? Refined levels of delusion. I really can't think of any very good examples of refined levels of delusion. And have the feeling you might have some in mind yourself. Can you give examples of some of slightly more refined levels of delusion? No. I'm sorry, I can't. If you're not seeing impermanence in anything, whether it's refined or coarse, so on a refined, on a refined nature, depending on which perspective you're looking at it, this building is going to be there for a long, long time, probably. As that building next door has been there for a long time, but is no roof on it, it's falling down, it's in rack and ruins, but it will still be there for a long, 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 long time. Probably been there longer than I've lived, and will be there longer than I have to live. Now, on a coarse level, that's a long time, but on a refined level, it's still a nature, it's still impermanent. This incense coil that I have burning in front of me will burn for a certain amount of time and then be gone. This is a nature, and it's more easy to notice, easy to see that will go. The Himalaya mountain range, one might consider and perceive to have been there forever, and that it will remain there forever, but is in fact continually changing without us seeing it all of the time. It's subject to anicca. So these are the levels of refined or coarse in terms of delusion. It's all delusion if you can't apply to it anicca, dukkha and anatta. Impermanence, unsatisfactoriness and out of your control. Whether you want to call it refined or coarse is totally subjective. It's dependent on your perception and your experience of it. I hope that answers it. There we go. Okay, my question is, when do you ordain? Can family members still be in contact with you and be able to talk and visit you in the monastery or kuti you are staying at? So, if there was someone needed to get hold of me to tell me something, some terrible thing had happened, I don't know, an accident, or someone was about to die, a close member of the family, they can do that. They're not going to ring up to have a chat, like you might ring your own family or keep in touch with your own family prior to ordination on a regular basis to chat about the weather, chat about the football or the cricket, politics, or this is Sampa Palapa Eustace talk. It's not necessary. They accept you've gone into a monastery, you've ordained, you are going to be living as a monk, and therefore they're really not useful or have much to contribute to that kind of a chat or conversation. So in terms of talk, very little really. I do keep in touch with my mother. Every couple of weeks we send each other a message to just touch base, because my mother's 83 and it's good to just check she's okay, as she likes to know that I'm okay and that all is well. Only through the means of modern communication is that possible. In the olden days, airmail and such like was possible. But that's about it. As far as visiting is concerned, well, they can come to visit the monastery like anyone else, offering dana. They won't be coming and hanging out in your kuti, lounging around for the afternoon, drinking cocktails, listening to music, enjoying the sun and watching TV or something like that. No, but they can visit in accordance with monastery etiquette. Whether we're in a kuti alone or whether we're in a monastery, it's the same. We have the same Patimokkha rules, 227 rules, which take into consideration guests and visitors and how we deal with them and what's appropriate and what is not. Monastic etiquette, actually there's another word for that, core what, but I think that's actually the Thai derivation of the proper word. But anyway, they could do, but I'm a long way away from my family. Going on with your comment, I know having equanimity and letting go of attachment is important when dealing with family members as a monk, but wouldn't it be difficult for family members to be okay with the more separate and solitary life of the ordained individual away from them. So equanimity you're applying to the other side there. Actually, no, I mean, we're not developing equanimity and detachment from our family. We're accepting always through our regular daily reflections of the five regular reflections of aging, sickness and death, that we will be parted from those that we love and those will be parted from us. By the process of our ordination, we're being parted from them in that respect a little prematurely, but there's nothing to say that we wouldn't have perhaps just died, or we might die tomorrow. Now, we as practicing monks, yes, are better able to understand that, and if perhaps our family that we have left behind have not been brought up with those reflections, are not Buddhist, they may miss you. They may find it difficult that you've gone to do something that they may not understand at all, or have any access or information about or knowledge of. And yes, that can be more difficult perhaps for them than the ordaining monastic themselves. They soon will, however, get over it with their other friends and family, filling the gap, filling the void. You can, to some extent, assure them of your contentment and happiness and safety and security in what you're doing, and that should be some compensation for them to know that you require no more support. You're being supported by the Sangha and the lay community that supports the Sangha. You're no longer their responsibility, and you are happy. By that I mean you are content in the way you're living, and this is represented in this emotion of happiness. So the one thing my mother, whom perhaps doesn't have a full understanding of what I've done necessarily, and doesn't need to, what she does understand is that I'm happy when I speak to her, and she is very content that I'm happy and pleased that she doesn't have to worry about me in any respect like that. If we have our own responsibilities with, say, mother and father, we didn't when we ordained, and those responsibilities would come up later, it should be that you are able to ensure you have no further family responsibilities when you ordain. But then, this can change. So my ordination was delayed because my father was ill and dying, and although I had no direct responsibility for his care, my sister did. So a close family member, she was directly involved in his care, and I stayed around and didn't ordain in order to give her support and also assist her with supporting my father in, even just as little things like transport and driving. But I can't make any claims to being hands-on supportive. I'm not very good in that respect as a carer, but she did a very good job as well as other close family members. But I held off from ordination because I thought it would be inappropriate for me to disappear, so to speak, into something that they wouldn't fully comprehend at that time. When he had finally died and I was able to do so, I then went to ordained. But then later on, if my mother becomes ill and needs help and my sister requires support, it is acceptable as a monk, an ordained bhikkhu, if you take leave of the Sangha, to go and visit and assist, if possible, with the care of your mother, or if it was your father, in those instances. Other than that, there is no need for ongoing, continued communication, tittle-tattle, gossip, and hanging around or hanging out at the monastery together. And they accept that, I think, as well as I accept it. It's something that is discussed before. You usually discuss with your family before you go and ordain. And this is one of the reasons we are required, in order to ordain, at whatever age we are, to get our parents' written permission to ordain. We have to have the permission of our parents, and it may not be specified that it has to be in writing, but I think most monasteries like to have it in writing just in case parents change their mind. And I have seen that happen, mothers turning up and dragging their samanera little monk boys out of the monastery time and time again. Eventually they return, and one in fact ordained with me. Took full ordination, bhikkhu ordination, at the same time as me. But his mother had dropped him off at the monastery and or he'd got to the monastery somehow or other, and she'd retrieved him on 2 or 3 occasions before he finally became a bhikkhu. And now she's very proud of him as a bhikkhu, and visits the monastery regularly, as he does his village back in India, and it's a very harmonious relationship. And I think on that note, I should leave it there, that happy note, and till next time, be happy and stay well. Sukhi Hotu.